All right. Hi there. It is the 2024 astrology forecast with Sarah Borland. And I thank everyone who's come tonight to be with me and to listen to my take on the 2024 forecast, the year ahead. So let me just really quickly go ahead and share my screen. There we go. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. And I just want to go ahead and start with what we're going to cover tonight. So a quick overview. I often, after I do an introduction, I like to look at cultural cues. In other words, the best way to learn about what is going to be happening or what has happened in history is to look at the culture. So we're going to look at a few things that are probably a little more unusual compared to what most people do with their astrology forecasts. I'm going to talk because my audience is mostly non-astrologers, some astrologers, but a lot of you really are newbies. So I'm going to talk about exactly what is astrology. We have big themes we're going to talk about. Then I'll kind of pare it down to looking at a personal note. So what exactly will be ahead for you guys on a personal level? And then key dates and final thoughts. And then at the end, we'll close the recording and I'll go ahead and at that point, we'll do a question and answer. All right, here we go. So just really quickly, I'm actually have been an astrologer for a little more than 25 years, but I did that mostly when I was working full time. I have a bachelor's degree in interior architectural design, and interior design was my first career. So that's why you'll see some of the things that come in terms of my love for color and the artistic sense that I have, and really is a big part of who I am. I also have a master's in education and curriculum and instruction. So I taught history and English for many, many years. So you'll see that kind of sneak in as well. That's my love of history. And so I love tying the astrology together with historical time periods. I'm a member of the Organization for Professional Astrologers, as well as the Tucson Astrology Guild. I do a combination of evolutionary astrology as well as traditional, and I'm also weaving in psychological and humanistic as well. Right now, I'm working on a book that is my working title, not the final title, is Unlocking Your Shadow, Discovering the Keys to Emotional Security. And I've also been a contributing author on a book as well as podcast guest, and have done some other speaking as well. Now, one of the things in terms of, I really love to always be noticing the cultural ties to the past. So notice, where have we been and where are we going? Now, I'm building upon where we felt as a society that things were really falling apart in a big, big way was, of course, 2020. Now, I just want to give you a sense. So Pantone is a company who they decide the color of the year, and they do a lot of the forecasting, the color forecasting, and really influence fashion, car companies, the colors that they choose to make for cars and so on. So the consultants at the Pantone Institute are really influencing so much of what is out in society. And of course, they're picking these colors long before the year of 2020 when they announce it. And now we're actually seeing other firms, like I actually noticed this last year, that all of the major paint companies also have a variation of this and calling it their color of the year. But Pantone is really the driver of the color industry. So 2020 was this classic blue, and blue in terms of color psychology has a lot to do with security. And you'll notice that when, if you remember back in the day when IBM required all the men to wear, suits with crisp white shirts and ties, And you'll see this in the primaries as well. When people are up giving debates and so on, you'll see they'll either be wearing a blue tie or a red tie. Well, blue is security, and red is meant to stimulate action. So it's very fascinating that during the time of great upheaval, that the color that was previously chosen long before the pandemic started in 2019, they chose a color that was security, which I find this really interesting. And of course, that resonates with the throat chakra. Now, 2021, I've very rarely do they pick two colors, but 2021 was happiness and stimulation. The yellow is what that translates to on a psychological level, and gray is about control and stability. So it's very fascinating. Of course, 2021, we were still in lockdown, not sure what was going on. And of course, we had, let's make everybody happy, but yet we're still in this very uncomfortable place. And of course, yellow corresponds to the solar plexus chakra. 2022 was a bit of a wild card. I like this one. We're back in the upper chakras again, a little bit more of a spiritual thing, and it's the third eye chakra, and it was this very peri color, which is about sensitivity. Last year was Viva Magenta, and of the color their wording was called boldness and confidence, which the red relates to Mars, and that is the root chakra. So again, it's going down in the body. It's more about really a survival type energy. So I think it'll be interesting to really look back on all of this in a few more years to really see how, that old adage of, hindsight is 2020, that this is a very interesting time to kind of be looking back and see how these colors actually really did play out. Now, you ready for 2024 color of the year? Here we go. This one is Pantone's color. It's called Peach Fuzz. They're calling it velvety, gentle, and subtly sensual. So it's interesting, even the wording that they use. So this one actually responds to the sacral and the solar plexus chakra because it's more of a blended color. So we'll see how this pans out and the connections to some of the events and some of the things that happen in the world. But obviously, people are exhausted and they're really trying to reach more of a heart center. Now, I do like to also look at the numerology before we get started. So the energy frequency of 2024. And this number, 2024, is an 8-year. And I love this because this really corresponds to also a lot of the themes that are showing up in the astrology because it's a great year for manifestation. This is actually a quote from Felicia Bender, who's a numerologist, and she says, "The ultimate expression of the 8 universal year is sheer empowerment, manifestation, and infinite abundance." So this is a great year for manifesting dreams. And then, of course, have to look at the tarot, the number 8 card, and it's the card of strength. And of course, strength is the same as fortitude, power, energy, action, and courage. And one of the things that I really love about symbolism in general, doesn't matter what type of symbolism it is, whether it's tarot or astrology or the I Ching or any of it, is that, and this quote for me really pulls it all together. It says, "Pull a thread here and you'll find it's attached to the rest of the world." And this really speaks to this interconnected nature that I really feel is something that is becoming more and more a part of the mainstream. People are really understanding the interconnectedness of all of our experiences. It isn't just that you have a daily life and you go to work and you come home and you eat, you talk to your family, you go to sleep, and you rinse and repeat, right? That there actually is more going on. And I think most of you are quite metaphysically focused. So this is something that you understand. And more research is coming out. One of the things that I really love, and I'm forgetting the name of the book, but has something to do with the intelligence of trees. And there was a documentary that I saw, and it literally is tree roots that, they've realized now that trees actually communicate with each other through the root system. So it's very similar if you think of the root system of trees with even how our brain is, like the neurons and all the synapses in the brain. It's the same thing. So there is a connection in terms of how all these different elements are communicating with each other, which has been not really obvious to us up until recently. So I'm always on the lookout of, different things that are starting to pull this interconnected theme together. And of course, couldn't go on without looking at the Chinese horoscope, which starts, and have forgotten already, whether it's the end of January, early February is the start of the Chinese New Year. And when the Chinese New Year begins, it's the year of the wood dragon. So that's about evolution, improvement, abundance, and prosperity. So that's kind of an overview of all the different symbolism things. So we're going to start with what is astrology. Now, astrology is the study and knowledge of cycles, and it's not necessarily deterministic. Astrology, the best use of astrology is using it as a mirror. It is a divine tool that can really reflect what's going on for you at the time. I can't tell you how many times I've been not necessarily paying attention to my own chart. Something will happen and I'll be like, oh, I have to look. And then it's like, of course, it is merely reflecting exactly my experience. So it can be a wonderful tool to really answer questions and to guide you. And of course, astrology has a history that goes back over 5,000 years. It does tell this story. This is a really important piece that most people don't understand. That's the fate versus free will. And just because you are born at a specific time with a chart, it is really up to your soul and you as an individual you're going to be expressing the energies either in a very elevated way, in a very positive way, or it can also be very destructive for yourself or negative, because every bit of the signatures holds both the yin and the yang energy. So that is something, like, as an astrologer, I don't know until I get in front of someone as to how the energy is playing out for them. Are they going to be quite high vibration and doing things in a very elevated way, in a very mature way? Or is it something that they're really struggling with and they're more in the beginning phases of learning how to individuate as a soul? So the energetic story in the chart really shows potential, but what exactly is done with it is up to you. So I don't know the specifics. I just know the energetic signatures, which really actually tells us quite a bit. And it really is a wonderful tool for co-creation. And of course, my favorite piece is to think about the spiritual integration. Like, how are we, as again, most of us are metaphysical here in the room, but how can we, as a soul, as a spirit who has forever existence, be really having a great experience in this physical body, in this temporal time space of, our lifetime as we know it, it's these personalities. So how can we integrate? And because my training back from the Berkeley Psychic Institute way back in the 80s, is that we are a soul who incarnates for this particular time period. And they called it spiritual kindergarten, is that we come in and it's the physical body incarnated is where we learn lessons. So that's the background that I carry with kind of my philosophy that kind of overlays everything. All right. All right, I just need to check my notes here to see where I'm at. All right. We're skipping all that. So 2024, we're diving in. 2024 marks a brand new beginning. So if we look back, 2020, 2022 was pretty much chaos. 2023 was a year of transition, and the next 2 years really mark a new beginning. It's a new beginning because there's a radical shift in consciousness. And if you've been listening to other types of people out there, other metaphysical type individuals that have YouTube channels or on Instagram or so on, we're really starting to understand that there is a 5D versus a 3D reality. And there's a shift that's happening. People are raising their frequency. Some people are talking about ascension. So we're definitely, things are speeding up and people are becoming more and more elevated, and metaphysical and occult type topics are really becoming more of the mainstream, especially if you're following any of the millennials, because they're incredibly interested in this. We're also manifesting a new paradigm. That's another big theme for this year. Shifts, because we've got Pluto going into Aquarius, and we have shifts in social norms. Now, this is the big thing, and we really have already got a taste of what this is. We see it in our political structure, where we have, very divided in our country in terms of kind of the way it's always been done, the old ways, and then that we're starting to get some information coming out about new ways of doing things. And so this is part of this new beginning. Now we also have, and also part of it with the shifts is we're going from kind of a top-down hierarchy to more of equality and more of a grassroots type efforts. So we're seeing this, we're just at the beginning phases, and we might have certain pockets where we're seeing this more than others. But certainly in the next 20 years, we're really going to see a big shift. We're still in the mode with Uranus and Taurus is going to be very active for 2 more years. We're going to continue having natural disasters such as floods and earthquakes on a greater scale than we have. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as it's coming up. And then, of course, this year is huge in terms of spiritual discipline and mastery. So that's kind of our big themes for the year. So I get this question a lot, and I thought this would be kind of fun to talk about this, but is this finally, are we really in the age of Aquarius or not? And sorry about that. I thought I set this up so I wasn't going to get in the ding dongs all the time. But is this the age of Aquarius? So we are just entering this year, 20 years of Pluto, one of the major outer planets, and I'll talk a little bit more about this down the line, is moving into the air sign. And we're in a larger cycle, which I'll touch on just briefly, of a 200-year cycle in air. The last 200 years have been in Earth. So there's a really big shift happening. And of course, when I say air signs, what are we talking about? And Aquarius, we're talking about, it's about ideas, it's about technology, humanity, equality. Like these are all Aquarian principles. Now I want to break this down just a little bit. And I think this will set the stage. The reason I'm sharing this information will kind of set the stage and help you understand, because we'll be talking quite a bit about Aquarius and how it's shifting things, is that we have the symbol of Aquarius as the kind of wavy lines there in the center. I think you can see my cursor. And then we have the sort of drawing of the symbol of Aquarius as well. So this is the glyph and this is the symbol. So the Egyptian hieroglyphics for water just happens to be this kind of wavy lines, the double wavy lines. And it's interesting that it also represents when air is blowing over water that we see, then you get chop, you get white caps, and that can be the symbol for this. And then it's also about flow of energy and wavelength. If we think about how we get a cell phone call or how radio waves, or when you turn on the radio, right? all of that information is carried through the air, and it's carried on a wavelength. Visible light is part of that wavelength, but then you have gamma rays and radio waves. All the other wavelengths are basically carried through the air. So even though Aquarius is the water bearer, the element that it rules, or that rules Aquarius, is the air sign. So I want to talk about the symbol. Up here we have number 1, Aquarius is one of the humanistic signs. You only have, let's see, it's the twins. So Gemini, which are also symbolized by 2 people. And you have Virgo, right, who is the virgin, or the one who's doing the harvest. And then we have Aquarius, who is a man who is pouring water. Now, we know that water is life, and water is incredibly important. We'll talk quite a bit about water tonight. But Aquarius, he's holding the water in a container and he's pouring it. But if you notice, he's not getting his hands wet. And this is very indicative of Aquarius as a sign, and that it tends to be all about the ideas and the intellect. As a matter of fact, if we think about water representing emotions, Aquarius doesn't want to get its hands wet. It's very much about staying clear of that. So the water can also represent like this flow of communication with God. Aquarius is the symbol of carrying intelligence from the heavens and disseminating it down to humans. So we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but I'm also really excited to share a little bit more that I've learned about this research of the intelligence of water, which is coming up a little bit later in the talk. So, all right, a couple of themes we're going to dive into next is these are revolutionary times. So we have Pluto entering Aquarius, which is all about this technology explosion. You think that we've had a big, huge explosion in technology? Just wait. Like, it is about to go crazy. We also have Neptune in Pisces, which is about innovative visions and this new paradigm. And we have Uranus in Taurus, which is about unexpected changes. Now, this is not new. This is a continuation of what's been going on since 2018, but it's a wake-up call. So again, where have we been and where are we going? All right, so this radical transformation, I'm going to start talking about Pluto, which is about death and rebirth, with transformation being the purpose of death and rebirth. That Pluto, this major outer planet, is moving into Aquarius this year. Matter of fact, on the 27th of this month, it'll be back in Aquarius. This is a signal to transform what no longer works. And we're experiencing an echo from earlier time periods. So when we think about what is changing, or what has been changing since 2008 up until right now, the era that we're moving out of is Capricorn. The Pluto cycle is 248 years. And what issues were we dealing with as a nation? What were our values? What were some of the items that were left unresolved? And of course, this was the birth of our country. So I did look at the chart of the United States to kind of pull this work together. And what we were dealing with 250 years ago is we were a group of colonies that were incredibly unhappy with the government. You know, we had King George over in the UK, sorry, in England, who was ruling from afar. And in the history books, he's not talked about very nicely. So he wasn't really taking our needs into account. So after many different things that occurred in history, it was like, that's it, we're done. And the Declaration of Independence was written, which is a document that tells the rest of the world, hey, you know what? we are not going to play by their rules anymore. We're our own independent country. And so the reason I bring this up is because it's really important to kind of keep our thumb on what's happening, and that we're seeing these same issues that are coming up and we're addressing them today. So the 5 American ideals, which come from the Declaration of Independence, are about equality. All men are created equal. It's about our rights, liberty, and freedom, opportunity to do and create a life for ourselves, and of course, democracy, which is, again, it was a voice that gave the power to the people, but that the people had a voice within the government, which they didn't have. All of these things they didn't have in the colonial time period, which is why we went to war and had the American Revolution. So it's that same energy that is being repeated today because it's come back around and it's being revisited. What's being revisited? Certainly, I think all of them, but really we're talking about rights, equality, and opportunity. There was in the 1960s another little flash, and it has to do with how the cycles continue. But we had the Civil Rights Act of 1960s. And of course, what's coming up for renewal again today, or has been in the last, since 2008, we have Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement. So it was about women, and then LGBTQ plus rights. So these were kind of really big pieces that were building upon the progress that was made in the 1960s. We're coming back for another little touch on this today. So again, the old, from 2008, which if you remember was when Pluto entered the sign of Capricorn in the United States, second house of money, resources, and government structures. This is about old, it's about control, it's about the hierarchy, it's the old way. So it's an impersonal determination to achieve. And it's now moving. The next big phase is 20 years in Aquarius, which is about moving towards humanity, egalitarianism, a new way of doing things. I truly believe that this will be the very last time we will have a president run for the United States that's going to be as old, because that's Capricorn. Capricorn literally represents old age, right? It's about this great maturity. It's so I really think when it moves into Aquarius, we're going to start seeing a much different type of politician. That's just kind of the energy that I'm picking up on. So what's going to happen with our government? What's going to happen with, kind of reworking the democracy? We're already seeing those things happening. Our economy has already moved. Aquarius is about technology. Our economy is already moving towards more and more towards digital. And of course, there's blockchain, Bitcoin type currencies that are in flux. But certainly, I mean, we're already sending things through Venmo and Zelle. So digital currency is we're already seeing that. Is something going to be happening to capitalism? I don't know. Digital education, or how is that going to implement? Like, all of our institutions are being redone. So I would definitely be looking for a lot of remaking of history in terms of the structures of things, because we're moving again from this impersonal determination to achieve to more of an all for one and one for all. Now, with that being said, it won't be all rainbow and sunshines from the get-go. We're still going to have a transition point where we're still having growing pains. So within this 20-year period, you have to figure out that Aquarius, when Pluto moves into Aquarius, it's kind of this baby energy. It's this transitional energy. So we're still going to see a lot of, people, making noise about what they want and how they want things to go. And then hopefully by the time it moves in later in 2044, hopefully we'll see some of these things be more in place. All right. Now, I don't know if I should go over this or not. Okay, so this 200-year cycle, and I'm just about done with the history of it. I think this is super, super interesting to see because astrology is about cycles and patterns. So we're moving into this 200-year cycle where Jupiter Jupiter conjunct Saturn. So Jupiter has a 12-year orbit. So it's orbiting around like this. And then you have Saturn so it's moving fairly fast, 12-year cycle. And then you have Saturn that moves in a 29-year cycle. So every time they meet up, they're meeting up in an air sign for the next 200 years, which is super cool. Now, this is the pattern. The last 200 years, it's been in an earth sign. It's about how do we make ourselves more comfortable, right? The Industrial Revolution was, let's make products that everybody can afford because they're now being made in factories and mass produced so that people have a more comfortable life. Really, it's about products and materialism. So this was the start of the Industrial Revolution in the early 1800s. Now we're moving into the information age. So you're going to see that it's really moving into this data and information. And I find this fascinating because I'm seeing even the younger generation, like even my kids and some of you, it may be your kids or your grandkids, is that they don't want stuff. Like if you have grandma's special vase that you want to make sure somebody gets, this younger generation is not interested in the stuff that past generations was interested in. So I find that really interesting. They're really more about keeping everything on their computer, being light, not having a lot of physical objects to tie them down. Of course, that's a generalization. There's going to be exceptions to that. But I think this is just an interesting side piece. All right. So we kind of talked about that. So we're entering this era of radical transformation. I specifically chose this image of all of these sort of cyborg, robot-y, not real kind of images, because that's really futuristic, which is a quality of Aquarius, is very future thinking. So Pluto, of course, is moving into Aquarius. It's starting like, well, last year it did a little dipping its toe in the water. It was transitioning back and forth between Capricorn and Aquarius, but it's this next 20 years of radical change. So we're going to talk a little bit about the technology. Now, technology is going to expand by leaps and bounds, and it already has. AI advances skyrocket, generative AI, which when we talked about it last year was just kind of conceptual, but I remember in May it was really starting to take off. I've just within the last month, I've called 2 different companies, and when you call in on the phone to get a hold of, customer service or whatever, and it's getting really, really sophisticated. They're starting to really understand human speech and revolutionize the way that we all are going to be interacting with technology. We're starting to see self-driving cars, of course, and personal flight. I think I have an image on the next one, like these little personal vehicles that we can fly more short distance, but that will be an interesting thing that's already happening. It's becoming more and more a hyper-connected world. There are massive data and visualization tools that so many companies are using because data is the new product, right? Data is it. Quantum computing, which is crazy the more I read about it. So quantum computers are expected, now this is interesting, expected to receive or achieve a 60-second or 1-minute coherence time by next year. Right now, it takes 30 minutes. So it's going from 30 minutes down to 1 minute. These computers use subatomic particles and create new ways of processing and storing information. This technological leap, and it is a leap, could bring computers capable of operating 1 trillion times more quickly and faster than traditional processors today. So it's just crazy, crazy going to explode. Can't even think of it. Um, of course, satellite technology, Starlink, which last year I had read that it was going to be 2 years out. I notice now it's expensive, but you can even on Costco get Starlink if you want. And of course, mostly it's for I think people who purchase it they either have an RV and they're traveling quite a bit, or they're in boats and so on. So it's literally Starlink is to finally bring internet into underserved locations around the world. And of course, it's going to do more than that. Hydrogen and fusion is another big technology expansion, and that's in the energy sector. Hydrogen, of course, is new, clean burning energy source that produces nearly zero greenhouse gas emissions. So all of these things are being influenced by not only the ideas expanding, but also AI and the technology that that's going to bring, as well as quantum computing. So, and robotics. We can't not think about robotics. It's becoming more and more prevalent. Japan, of course, is the leader in humanoid robotics, which is kind of interesting. We've had industrial robotics, especially in like big corporations, for many, many years. I remember years ago seeing the robotics putting together cars, even in Detroit. So, but that's even getting to be more and more advanced. Just wanted to show you a couple of quick images. So this is this personal flight vehicle that's electric. They're also doing electric boats. They're as well as like scooters, and of course we have electric cars. So these personalized flight vehicles are already they're already out there in testing phases. If you Google it, you can watch videos of them using them. Now, this is the interesting thing is the future of brain implants. Again, it's controlling devices with our thoughts. They're already well underway. Neuralink, which is Elon Musk's company, has started in September of this year to start with human trials. It's a 6-year trial of brain implants. So, of course, we see people who have, spinal cord injuries or are completely immobile they're of course going to be the people who are going to be best benefited by this, to be able to just use their thoughts to control devices, which is super, super cool. So these are some really positive things that could come out of this technology explosion. I find all this to be super, super exciting. All right, now we're going to transition to the next big theme, which is innovative visions. Now, Neptune has been in Pisces since 2012. It's got one more year before it moves out and Neptune moves into Aries. But it is in the last degrees at this particular point, which can be a kind of a stressful time, but it's also the highest possibility. So Neptune is the ruler of Pisces in modern astrology, and this is activating the highest levels of spirituality and ascension. So we have heightened compassion that we're seeing already at this time. But at the same time, it also causes some problems. So, which I'll talk about in just a second. So, heightened intuition, people having dreams and visions, spirituality and ascension. And I don't know if it's just Tucson or if it's just this circle of people I'm involved here in my community, but I can tell you that just 5 years ago, I don't think I knew any psychics, or I may have, no, I really didn't. And here, I know so many people who are really in touch with their own intuition. I know several mediums. I know so many people that have a good sense of their own gut instincts, and whether they want to call themselves psychics or intuitives. And it's something that I use in my astrology practice as well. I've really heightened my own abilities. And the more you use these gifts and that everybody has, the more you're going to find that it can be a part of your life and really influence your life. Just in terms of being able to read situations and have a greater bit of information. So on another side, in terms of, what also Neptune and Pisces symbolizes, or what it can influence, is empathy and compassion. So we have this greater sense of empathy and compassion. And this is a 13-year cycle. So what I first want to do is look back. And when I was getting ready to talk about this, and I said, well, what happened 13 years ago when Neptune entered Pisces? What kind of things were being stirred up? And again, thinking about inclusion. And during the decade of 2010, so it's kind of a broad range of time period, we had Occupy Wall Street, same-sex marriage. Of course, prior to 2012, and I kind of focused on Washington because that's where I used to live. But prior to 2012, there were 38 states that had included same-sex marriage. But then in 2015, a Supreme Court case ended the Defense of Marriage Act and federally legalized same-sex marriage. So this is all happening during this Neptune and Pisces, this being able to, and it's not working in isolation, because I'm also thinking about it in terms of, breaking down old ways of doing things, that Pluto and Capricorn. But this is really about having inclusion and empathy for different people. At that particular time, during that 2010 decade, of course, earlier, Seattle remained a sanctuary city, which was huge opposition for that when that was an issue. And again, Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement, we had police accountability and training measures. But on the flip side of all of that opening of our hearts and opening of, inclusion of more and more groups of people, we had hate crimes increase, right? Seattle by itself saw a 400% increase in hate crimes since 2012. We saw emboldened white supremacy and white nationalist groups. So even though we have this energy for all of these great things to be happening, and more people to feel like they're part of the American culture and the American dream and have full rights and equality, there's always some pushback as we transition. So one more thing I just wanted to talk about was Standing Rock, which was the Dakota Access Pipeline fight. And that was began in November 2016. So we're seeing some of these social movements and social shifts that are happening, that we really look to the astrology and say, I see the signature, and I can see the things that are happening are being repeated from earlier time periods or being expanded upon. So we're going to bring it down to more of the personal. And one of the things is, again, with this energy that's out there right now, is what exactly is your dream? What is your greatest hope for the future, both personal as well as the collective? Because again, we're talking about this signature of manifestation, this 8-year. There's a lot of great energy out there throughout this whole year for really fine-tuning what our dreams are and making them come true, actually really working wholly at manifesting them. So one of the things that's really important to do is when Neptune moves into Aries, it's going to be more about taking action and letting your dreams take form. So this is a great year to prepare. So in order to do that, like the step before manifestation is having a vision. So you must have a vision for the future in order to manifest one. So this is a fabulous time to really working, taking practical steps to make things happen, but then also to step back and make sure that you're keeping that vision alive. All right, we're going to transition one more time, one more little bit of history. This is about Uranus and Taurus, which Uranus is about sudden unexpected changes. It can be like a lightning bolt. It's also about brilliance, but Taurus represents the earth. So this is an 84-year cycle. It entered into Taurus in 2018 and will leave Taurus in 2026. So we still have a couple of more years of this. And I want to talk just really quickly about what happened the last time Uranus was in Taurus was in the 1930s and early 40s. And just really quickly to give you a sense, that was when the Dust Bowl occurred in the United States and the locust plague of 1931, which devastated millions of acres of farmland, which is why I chose this picture. You'll kind of see off the left there, it was looks like deserted, almost desert type earth. Now, what was happening in the world was this was the rise of Hitler and World War II. So what happened is we had food rationing, we had food scarcity, especially in war-torn countries. And this was a time of innovative chemicals. So there were countries, especially our country, was really concerned with how are we going to get our resources, our food to the troops, to feed the troops that are overseas. And there was a tremendous push on innovation. We had fertilizers to be able to try and get crop output raised, to grow things faster and more yield per acre. We also had chemicals were introduced in food preservation. This was when frozen juices came about, in the cute little cans that I remember buying when I was a kid, frozen vegetables and so on. So again, this focus on, and at the same time, we had victory gardens here so that people were growing their own food and they weren't really pulling from the national resources because they wanted to be able to ship all those to the men that were fighting overseas. So just keep that in mind, because as we start looking at what has been happening between 2018 and 2026 is pretty fascinating. It's kind of a full circle moment. So on the negative side, what we've been seeing over the last several years is this environmental instability. We have Earth, and again, remember Uranus is like sudden, unexpected. It actually is literally like shaking Earth. So we have superstorms have been happening, floods, fires, massive hurricanes and tornadoes all around the world. And just last week, oh my gosh, again, I have family from Santa Cruz, and Santa Cruz, California, again, had a huge storm, just come into Capitola, which is where my mother-in-law used to live. That whole area, that Capitola, it's more touristy now, but it just got completely flooded. And it encountered that last year as well, unseasonal, crazy weather. We have also glacial ice is melting all over the place. Tides are rising. So these are all things that come under that Uranus and Taurus. When Uranus and Taurus kind of make connections, these are kind of the things that when we look throughout history, these kind of things happen. And we're definitely seeing this. Yeah, and I'm seeing somebody saying mass extinctions as well. Thanks, Melanie, great comment. So it can also, because it's about the earth and about food, we certainly saw in the pandemic, we saw supply chain issues with getting food to the people. I remember coming back from Thailand to absolutely bare shelves in the grocery store. And my house, because we were gone for 4 months, I had completely gotten rid of all my food. So when I came back, no food, no toilet paper. It was very interesting. So those are kind of things. Those were the challenges. Now, what are some of the positive aspects? Some of the radical change in terms of how we relate to the earth and to each other. Now, on the positive side, people are becoming more and more aware that we need to heal the earth. We need to heal our bodies. We need to heal our health. All things that are related to Taurus. We have organic and green solutions are just exploding. Technological advances such as, I mean, certainly AI will play a part of it, but the digital IDs with storing health information, no longer is it that they're analog or paper copies. We now have really great access to our information digitally in terms of really managing our own health, as well as having them on devices and so on that we carry with us. It's about sustainable food production, alternatives to toxic ingredients. So, like where what was that, 80 years ago? It was about the beginnings and the use of toxic ingredients. And now we realize that it went too far and that these are things that are not good for us. They're not good for the earth. They're actually causing problems. So we're being innovative again and coming up with new ingredients. We're also really coming into awareness, some people faster than others, but that animals are sentient beings. More and more people are moving towards plant-based way of eating. There's been an evolution in food with things like Beyond Meat and products like that are plant-based, but are trying to do a better job of simulating meat, which will help more and more people move away from animal products, if not fully with being vegan or vegetarian, but certainly maybe several days a week being more plant-based. So some pretty exciting things that are happening. All right, next theme. Spiritual maturity. This is Saturn in Pisces, which is a great time of reflection and integration. Now, Saturn has been in Pisces for a year or so. And again, in order to understand your spirit, you must understand energy. And one of the things, now that's really, really important. So when we talk about energy, and I think most of you, especially being metaphysical people, really understand the fact that when science has looked at this mass that we call our physical body, we think of it as solid. But in reality, at the subatomic level, at the atomic level, we're actually just vibrating pieces of energy that have created this form. So that's a really big piece to take away. And just remember that as we're advancing very quickly, we will, that this is about how do we take our spirituality, which can sometimes be out in the ethers, but how can we really make it a part of our daily lives if we haven't done it already, but really step into the discipline and mastery of our spiritual selves. And of course, we can begin this with bringing your dreams to reality. So Saturn in Pisces, which started in 2023 and will be going until 2025 and maybe a little bit touching into the next year. But this is about manifesting your dreams and visions. So working with visualizations, working on your energy bodies, clearing out your aura, clearing your chakras, and raising your frequency, really trying to step into being in that positive place as much as possible, because we do think first and then everything follows. So it's always about kind of our intentions and how can we integrate this to be a really major part of our daily lives. So a question that I have for you is, what practice will you deepen? So this is for you to think about. And a really good time to set aside to deepen your practice, obviously you should be doing it like start now, don't wait. But certainly when we go through, Saturn goes into retrograde motion or apparent retrograde motion in June 29th through November 15th. So think of it, July through mid-November is a really auspicious time for reflection. So this is a great time to really just sit and think about, what is the meaning of your life? How can you integrate and deepen whatever is most important to you? Because we're pretty fragmented as human beings. If you look at most people in our country, certainly Western civilization, there are people who just don't understand that they're a spiritual body within this physical body, that there's actually many bodies, right? I think there's 7 or 8 bodies that we have. And how can they use this information to really kind of step it up? And there's a lot of energy out there where we're kind of, even the people who aren't doing the work are kind of being drug along. But do what you can to increase your awareness and deepen your practices. Now, I talked about this a little bit, but I really wanted to focus on the interconnected nature, recognizing truly how we are interconnected. So I did introduce this idea last year. So some of you will if you were there at my talk last year, you will recognize some of this. But again, we have the literal, there are many keywords that are associated with certain terms in astrology. And of course, Saturn is about structure and Pisces rules water. So we could think about what is the structure of water. And really wanted to focus on the spiritual consciousness and water itself. We know that we are made up of, I've heard various, percentages, but we're made up of, is it 80 or 90% water our physical body is made up of? We are definitely pulled by the moon's phases in terms of, as well as the tides of the earth are pulled by the gravitational pull of the moon, which can ebb and flow throughout the month. But so just consider that, how much water we are when we start talking about water. So Dr. Emoto, he published this book, Hidden Messages of Water, back in 2001. I looked that up today. And he was the first person who really looked at water. And if I'm remembering correctly, he had 2 kind of containers of water. One was he would influence it with positive messages. The other one was negative messages. And then he took and he photographed under a microscope how the water was different. And if you can see right here this was one that had a positive message and almost looks like a snowflake. It is absolutely beautiful. And the ones that were subjected to the negative energy or the negative messages, that they looked horrible. I mean, you could see the proof in the 2 photographs. And he did quite a bit of this work. So I just wanted to read this to you as I was flipping through the book again. It's a chapter 4, titled, "The World Will Change in But a Moment." And it says, "Do you know where you can obtain really good water? Perhaps at the foot of the Swiss Alps, or maybe at the North or South Pole. It's not hard nowadays to find bottled water claiming to be the best in the world. But can good water really be purchased? Water is simply not just H2O. No matter how natural or pure the water you drink, without a pure soul, it will not taste good. And let me ask you, how clear is your soul? Are you weighed down by troubles at work? What about family problems? Is your consciousness troubled? If it is, then you may find that the water you drink tastes plain and dull." And I would actually even go further than that and say that it actually is having a detrimental effect on us. So the really cool thing is, that work was done, 22, 23 years ago. And there was a woman that I heard about from another astrologer. She just introduced the woman's name, and I've been following her ever since. There's a book title she wrote called The Secret Intelligence of Water, and her name is Veda Austin. And the pictures that I'm showing you here, this is her research that she's doing, and I've taken these screenshots off her website, is she's literally got a petri dish of water. She writes something on a piece of paper, puts the water over the top of it, and within a short amount of time, then she freezes it, and then she photographs the frozen images. And of course, you can see here, here's the 4 with the water, and then after she photographs it, the water mirrors the image of what it sees, which is kind of cool. So this is water's response to an image. And here's some other ones that she's done, and I'm not going to go into those. But now she's getting to the point where she is actually asking questions of water. So she's having a theory that water actually has a consciousness, and that it actually is, is a sentient being of its own, which is very cool to think about. It kind of blows your mind. One of the practices that I try to do every day, and I often forget and then have to circle back around to, is my first glass of water in the morning, as I hold the water, the glass of water in my hand, and then I just, whether I'm thinking as a gratitude practice, couple of things that I'm grateful for, kind of think about, some really positive messages for myself, and then ingest that water. I mean, why not? I mean, it's such an easy thing to do, and it doesn't really take any time. So this is some really great way just to kind of do some healing work on yourself and let you ingest that most beautiful, most positive water that you can. There's one more thing. There's the water codes by a woman by the name of Dr. Carla Newday. And I think this is so cool. She's actually using, she's working with farmers that, like in the California valley where they grow all the vegetables, where they do whatever normal watering, and the fields are producing, they know how much a field will produce of whatever it is they're growing. They're now putting these devices inside the pipes to actually create a vortex with the water, and then using that to water the fields. And they're finding that they're getting a huge amount of output, a tremendous output of what's that called? Produce, a greater yield. So there's really cool things that are happening with this water. And I really think it is connected to Saturn being in Pisces. And this kind of Saturn is also the teacher, right? So we're learning more about water, and we're maturing into what we think water actually is. We've just been taking it for granted for so long. We don't even give it a second thought. So it's kind of a new way to frame or to think about water. All right, we're getting close. So Jupiter moves into Gemini, and this is a time to be inspired and a time to learn. I'm going to pick up the pace here. So this is about, in May 25th, Jupiter moves into Gemini, and I challenge you to just put this on your calendar and just kind of take a temperature before and a temperature after, because it'll be moving in, so it won't happen just on this day. It'll actually keep going for quite a while. But what ideas excite you? Jupiter makes everything kind of bigger, and it likes to expand things. So I'm thinking that it's going to be about an inspired sense to learn, communications, maybe bolder, maybe being out there, stimulated ideas. So some really cool energy that's going to come about with that. All right. Now we're going to get into the notable dates. So I'm going to go through this rather quickly. So in the winter, meaning like right now, from the first of the year. So we started January with this Capricorn energy, as we do every year. And Capricorn is the builder of the zodiac. It likes to build and accomplish. And so this particular year, January 1st, actually had Mercury was stationed direct. It had been retrograde, and then January 1st, again, it was moving direct. And we also had a Virgo moon, and Virgo is about the details. It's like making lists, making sure it happens. So when Capricorn and Virgo get together, it's like an awesome time to set goals for the year. January 21st, we have Pluto moving into Aquarius, and we have the sun meeting it in Aquarius. So it's like this big golden sunshine energy all over Pluto in Aquarius, which feels to me quite a bit like this. It's a beautiful moment. January 27th, Uranus stations direct in Taurus. And then the second half, so like March, where it's all about dreams and intuition. We have the Pisces energy, visualize your desires. We've got a great Pisces new moon. We have one little hiccup, kind of put it in red, Mars square Uranus. When those two come together, expect the unexpected. So just kind of pay attention to the news, in that week time period. Who knows what's going to happen? March 11th, romantic love and compassion. On the 17th, visions come to light. Like, it's really great energy. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is April. So April 8th, we have a solar eclipse. Now, this map shows two kind of eclipses converging. This is the path of the eclipse. The one on the left, kind of coming from Oregon and heading down through Texas, this was the one on October 14th last year, so 2023. And then the new one, we will also be able to see, this is again the path of the eclipse where you'll be able to see it, starts in the upper northeast and then comes down through Texas. So this is pretty interesting energy that when this eclipse happens, I'm really, really curious where they converge, if there's going to be anything happening in Texas, because the solar eclipses, the resonance of the energy, it starts roughly about a month before and goes to up to about 6 months after, 5 to 6 months after. So really, from about March until I think that's like the end of October or beginning of October, we're going to have the resonance of this particular solar eclipse. Now, we had one in 2017. We had one in October that we could see from the United States. We're having one in April again. Don't think that this is just super common. Like, don't rest on your laurels. If you're anywhere near this eclipse path, pay attention to it. See if you can experience it, because this is the last one that we will see in the United States until 2044. So it'll be a long time again before we actually have a chance to see an eclipse on this in the soil of our country. Now, moving on to the spring, we have breakthroughs. We have expanded freedom, kind of that energy, as well as unexpected event. So I just talked about the solar eclipse, which is happening in Aries. But on April 20th, this is really big breakthrough energy. It's, again, Jupiter conjunct Uranus and Taurus. And I know that's all blah, 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 blah for those of you that are not astrologers. It's sextile with Mars and conjunct Saturn. So there's a lot of this push-pull energy along with this like craziness. Don't know what's going to happen. Potentially, often when these signatures come about, it's unexpected events to Earth. It could be an earthquake or a flood. Maybe it's food supply chain issues. Mars rules accidents. So no idea what's going to happen, but certainly this energy speaks to the fact that something could happen. So we'll see. The last time that we had this breakthrough energy of Jupiter and Uranus conjunct, it wasn't in Taurus, it was in a different sign. Oh, it was in Pisces earlier, was 2011. And this is when the Arab Spring revolutions occurred. This was the kind of kicking off of that whole domino effect of Arab Spring. So that started in 2010, 2011. So who knows? It's not necessarily going to be a revolution, but who knows what it's going to be. But it's really big energy that third week in April. Now, in May, This is, again, some really nice energy. This is elevated self-worth. So fresh starts. We have Taurus new moon in early May, and then later in May, we have Jupiter entering Gemini, which we talked about, inspired ideas and so on. Now, the summer months, this is where it gets kind of crazy. So the beginning, certainly in June, we've got all of this nurturing energy. We've got the new moon in Cancer, mother. We have full moon in Capricorn later in June, father energy, right? This beautiful, beautiful nurturing energy of Cancer, Capricorn. Then in July, this is like astrologers will say, like, you can't make this stuff up. Like, so July 15th, there is Mars, which is warrior energy. Again, I'm looking at the negative aspect of it. Like, it's about initiation and taking action, right? So lots of positive things. But when it's next to Uranus, when these two come together, Uranus is about lightning, sudden, unexpected. It's also rules rebellions, right? It could be a potential outburst. Well, what the heck is happening on July 15th? The Republican National Convention starts. So it's kind of like, you can't make this stuff up. So just keep your eyes tuned to that and just kind of see. I mean, we know it's like things are heating up. We know this intuitively, but when the astrology reflects it, it's like, oh my gosh, what is it going to be? And then, of course, craziness. I'm not handpicking these. These are the big volatile moments. August 19th, Jupiter is square Saturn and Mars. And again, it's like, let's expand. Like, Saturn is about constriction, like it wants to pull things in, it wants to make rules and limitations. And Mars is warrior energy, right? So it's agitation. So we have this constriction and this agitation coming toe to toe, not nearly as negative as the one in July, but certainly no fun. And that's the first day of the Democratic National Convention. It's like, they obviously don't use astrologers to set these dates. So it's kind of crazy. And then in September, we have a lunar eclipse in Pisces. All right, in September. So now we're into fall, a little bit more volatility and instability. We have Pluto in its last gasps at the very end of Capricorn, 29 degrees. It slips back into Capricorn September 2nd, goes through about the third week in November. And at these last degrees, it's like a purge, right? What they call in astrology, we call this an anaretic degree. It's very sensitive and it's very volatile. So who knows what's going to happen? But of course, we know this is during the time of our election as well. Because of course, the election is usually first Tuesday? I've forgotten. It's usually right around the 7th or so of November. So Pluto is retrograde during this last really kind of volatile time period. We also have a full moon on the 17th of September, a lunar eclipse, which has the signature of power and disruption. And we have a solar eclipse on October 2nd. Again, Mars opposite Pluto, a little bit more potential for violence, more discord. Mars enters Leo in November. And then, of course, Pluto moves away from Capricorn finally, and once and for all, moves into Aquarius and stays there for 20 years. So we have Neptune in December is stationing direct. And again, it could be about illusions, but it's also about heightened intuition. So again, think very clearly. A couple of last things before I wrap this up. People are often curious about Mercury retrograde, which everybody goes, don't sign contracts, don't buy a computer, don't get a new cell phone, don't do anything big. It happens 3 times a year, every year. So this year it's 3 weeks in April, 3 weeks in August, and 2 or 3 weeks in November. Not, this is just remember this, whatever you are doing, slow down and review. Retrogrades are about pause and reflect, and of course, with Mercury, always before speaking, and connect with your inner wisdom. Like always double check. And again, for me, it's all about the dreams getting real. The big message for me this year is about weaving your spirituality into your routines, mysticism. Fantasy gets grounded, reality gets infused with fantasy. It's kind of like things start melding and coming alive. So this is a fabulous time to this whole entire year to really ground your practices. So take that to heart. So, how is it that you should work with astrology? Like, really think about what are the seasons of your life? Because it's not only like what the energy is throughout the year, even if you're not paying attention to it, it will be speaking to you. But really, what season is it that you are in your life, and how can you work with the energy in a way that you're working with it? You know, farmers used the Farmer's Almanac is actually based upon the moon cycles. Like they knew you plant during certain times. Fishermen's, the tide charts that fishermen's use, that has to do with again the moon cycles as well. So the old knowledge um, is actually still with us. It's just we have to open our hearts and open our minds to the fact that this isn't woo woo. This isn't just crazy stuff. It's actually about cycles and paying attention to the cycles that we are a part of here on Earth. So, and the old astrologers' maxim is as above, meaning cosmos, so below, meaning it affects us here on Earth and in our human bodies. So I want to thank you for attending. Just a quick blurb on what I do. I do astrological consulting. Please sign up for my newsletter. You'll This is my year to start doing my newsletters, and I will probably offer them only quarterly as it comes out. I don't even think I'll be able to make once a month, but quarterly is something I'm shooting for, at least to start. You'll be first to hear about events, updates on news. If you sign up for a subscription with my newsletter, I will send you a focus for 2024 handout, which is kind of the big dates to kind of keep handy. For consulting, I do year ahead forecasts. I also really focus on soul purpose and life path. I do more of a consultation style. So there's lots of back and forth and questions and answers throughout the process. It's not just a me talking and you listening. I do relationship readings, solar returns. I answer important questions using horary and other devices. So that's me. And again, I want to thank you for attending. And just remember that you were born with potential. And as with any particular tool, you are the one that has to do the work. So get busy. And if you want to get in contact with me, I'm on Facebook, both my personal account as well as my astrology page. I'm on Instagram. There's my website, my email. If you want to subscribe to my newsletter, you can just put your phone over that QR code to go ahead and subscribe. So thank you so much. Oh, great comments. I have not been able to really pay attention to them, but thank you for you guys who are commenting. For those of you that want to stick around, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. I'm hoping I recorded. It looks like I did. So I'll go ahead and stop the recording and then we can chit chat, or if you have questions, we can talk.